Hello, everyone. Yay, you guys. I have such an amazing treat for you all this week on the podcast. I mentioned a couple weeks ago that I was going to have my gorgeous and amazing friend, Renelle Chapman, come on. And she is here with us today, virtually in the studio. Hi,
Hi, Britta.
Renelle.
I'm so happy. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, so excited. Renelle is actually going to be diving in deep with us today about unleashing desire. She is a transformational coach and founder of her work that you call Tantra Maha. Can you tell me where that name came from?
Yeah. So I've been studying Tantra for many years now. It's something that I found in my late 20s. And I've received so much from the teachings from it, not just in my body, but also spiritually and mentally, it's taught me a lot. And Maha means great. And so that is kind of
Ooh.
great tantra or yeah, like because it means I guess it means so much to me. So that's where the name Tantra Maha comes from. It's from it being
So
this
beautiful.
kind of really powerful um thing that I've experienced in my life.
Oh, I love that. I know I did not plan to ask you that, but I just like spontaneously was like, I have to know.
I'm glad you asked the question actually, because I guess some people go, oh, what does that mean? And it's nice to be able to
Mhm.
say where it came from. So yeah, I'm glad you asked.
Of course. So, in your work, you are super passionate about helping women be able to reconnect with their desires, reclaim their power, and break free from the societal conditioning that tells them to want less, to be small. Um, I love too that you, from your own experiences, have a very trauma informed approach to this, helping women heal from past wounds. I mean, so many women have, right? Trauma around our sensuality, trauma around not feeling safe embodying our truth and being completely disconnected from stepping into a life of that deeper pleasure and self trust. So, I just have to say, like, I love Renelle and I met last year in the Existential Kink Penetrate program and we ended up trading coaching back and forth, and that's really where I fell in love with you and your presence. You held space for me on some really big things that I was going through last year. So I am so excited for you to get to come on the podcast and share with my listeners what I know you're so passionate about it, right? Like what it looks like to actually integrate the pieces of your mind and your body and your spirit together so that you can embrace your full self,
Yeah.
right? It's like a multi process for you. I love that we were kind of talking about this earlier. Tantra isn't just what many people think of being, sexual, it is a full body, mind,
Yeah.
spirit
Yeah,
thing
and weaving
for
it all
you.
together, and I think that's kind of where I found it from. It's because, I felt so disconnected from my body. I felt like I was always, uh, just outside of my body when I was connecting, not just intimately when having sex, but with all my relationships, and just with the world itself, I felt very overstimulated by
Mm.
everything. Loud noises, big crowds of people, and even just being in situations where there was a lot of people around me, and or maybe there was a lot of sensation, and so I felt very disconnected from myself, from my relationships, from the world itself. And I think one of the most beautiful things that Tantra has taught me is to be able to connect in with others, to connect in with the world, with everything around me, and with my
Ooh.
relationships. And also like learning what I need myself in order to be able to do that. So, knowing when I need to step back and come out and take a moment to recharge, is has been very powerful for me. I've always, thought of myself as being kind of highly sensitive or oversensitive, or certainly that's how I felt as I was growing up. And this kind of had me feel like there was something wrong with me. I used to think, why can't I experience pleasure in my body? Why does everything have me feeling like I'm kind of short circuiting or just completely out of
Mm.
my body and disconnected? And so just really learning to honor what was going on in my body and taking some time to take a breath or give myself space, or um, yeah, just learn really what
Oh,
I needed in order to thrive. And you know, it took a long time for me to understand that, to see this as, not a weakness in me, but also like a superpower, something that you can really work with and create more
yes.
connection and more pleasure and, more intimacy, not just with myself, but with the world around me. And so I think that's something beautiful about time travel.
And like, I just have to say, I'm having such a gorgeous, and I'm sure other women on the call are too, in this moment of hearing you. It's one of the things I love about you, Renelle. The way you speak allows me to hear things and understand things in ways I hadn't previously. But you saying this experience, putting in words this experience of feeling extra sensitive to the world and overstimulated by it. I don't think I really woke up to that. It's only been like the last few years that I think I could say, actually, yeah, more of my lived experience has been being overstimulated for most of it. So I'm really curious, when you were younger, how did you know? Like you mentioned, thinking of yourself as kind of highly sensitive. How did you know that you were that way?
People would say so, often they'd say, yeah, well, sensitive. So that was one. But I guess just how I felt in the world, like I was saying about, loud sounds, they would make me kind of shudder. And, if there was a lot of people running around, or like definitely as a child, if I was around lots of children, if there was like lots of screaming, I would often take myself away and just would maybe go sit in a corner. And so there was this label of being shy, and I kind of grew up thinking, oh well, I must just be shy, I must just be different, or there's something
Yes.
wrong with me, or maybe I'm just not like everyone else. So
Which is so, which I bet I have this like segue a little bit, like I want to tie in. You get labeled as shy because you're so sensitive. I would imagine that does kind of limit or inhibit some of your sexual exploration or desire, perhaps because you don't view yourself maybe as this more open, desirous individual. Did you experience that at
yeah,
all?
absolutely. I found it very difficult to express myself sexually when I was younger. I think everything used to just move way too quickly for me. Um, and
Mm,
my body would just shut down. And so for a lot of years, I just thought maybe I just don't enjoy sex. Maybe, that's just not for me. And, it took me a long time to really figure out that actually, I didn't know myself. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know what I desired. I didn't know what my body wanted more than anything, and, like, we have a lot of ideas
yes.
in our mind about what we want, but really it's when we really start to listen to our body and drop in is when we can really understand what it is that makes us tick, and learning what it is that really brings our body alive, and what it takes to allow our body to just completely surrender into pleasure and feel safe in somebody
Oof.
else's touch, and not just somebody else's touch, but our own touch as well. So like, that's really important,
Yes.
is understanding that you know I just used to, like, go to my body if I was self pleasuring, for instance, and it was like, what can she give me?
Mhm.
Can she give me an orgasm? Can she give me this? What kind of pleasure can my body give me? And I think what was a big change for me, and also in partnership, is like really taking that time to slow down, to give myself or my body, time to just feel safe, ask, what do you want?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of what can you give me, is like speaking to your body and saying, or listen and feeling like, what do you want? Where
Do you
I
want
want
to be
to be touched,
touched?
and can I touch you? Like even asking permission.
Permission.
And
Ooh, that is so sexy asking because, yeah, I mean, for a lot of us, our formative experiences with being touched, for those of us that have had sexual trauma, they were not consensual. And if that happened very, very young, before you even had maybe a connection with yourself, a consensual connection with yourself and how you want to be touched, you move through the world not even knowing that that is a thing, that having permission not only from others, but permission from yours. I love this idea, Renelle. You're like blowing my mind now that I'm really dropping in with you on the idea of having a relationship with your body, thinking of your body as something that you go to, not to get something or this tool that you use, but something that perhaps has its own wants, desires that maybe you up in your head as the personality you think of yourself as maybe disconnected from.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that was the biggest game changer for me, is really dropping in and feeling what that was, what is it that she wants, what does she need? And how can I give that to her? How can I feed her with that? And the more I did, and the more I learned, and the more I understand, um, I guess the more we kind of receive together, it's goes from
Mm.
being, these two separate parts, to like completely joining together. And I guess that's another thing about um tantra, is it is that kind of bridge between the human and the spirit. It's bringing those two parts of union.
Ooh.
And it's the same with the different energies in us, the masculine and the feminine, for instance, or the you know the different polarities that are in us, like pleasure and pain and love and fear and all these different things. Like how can we bring those together? And um
So, do you feel like Tantra? I loved you talking about it as a bridge, and I've never thought of it before as a bridge between polarities such as like pleasure and pain. But it sounds like the way you think of Tantra is it's a reconnecting with your body or, practices that allow you to be with both, to be able to move through both of those experiences in
yeah,
life.
absolutely. And I guess like a practical example of it, for instance, if we have maybe tension or pain in any part of our body, and allowing ourselves to be with that, well, regardless of whether we label it as a good or bad sensation that we're having, but just allowing ourselves to
Mm.
be with that sensation that's going on. And especially if we've had sort of sexual trauma in the past, or even if we've just had, we've overridden our boundaries, which I know I've done plenty of times.
Oh my God, yes.
I,
Right? It's not even like someone necessarily doing something that I didn't want to happen, but it's like I let something happen that I thought I wanted, that looking back on after it's over, I'm like, ugh, actually, that was too fast. Or I don't even know if it was too fast or not. I just feel dysregulated and like something happened that for some reason I thought I was going to like and now I don't like and I
yeah,
didn't talk about it.
yeah, and we can hold this tension in our body, right? And through being present and through being intimate with our body, and going into those places and just really feeling what's there, and again not labeling it as something good or bad, we're just kind of giving it our
Mm.
attention. And so in that sense, I feel like we take away I guess the label of what it is, and we're just present with what's there, and then it allows for that energy to move through us, and to kind of open up into something more expansive, more spacious. And And so I guess that's a kind of
Oof.
practical way of maybe how these things come together in that way.
I'm I'm super like dying curious. You've been talking about all this beautiful work, and I would love to hear where that starting point was. Like, where was the moment where you start either, I don't know if it's that you found Tantra or was it a specific, experience that started your journey on this path of reconnecting in with your body in such a beautifully, intimate
Yeah.
way.
I mean, there's been kind of not just one moment, but many. Um, I don't feel like, we get to a point and then, it just opens up. For me, it's been very sort of transient
Mm.
where, I first started to look at Tantra when I was in my sort of mid to late 20s. And I was really disconnected from my sexuality, you know, and also had a lot of shame. I had all these like very kinky desires as well, these things that felt very taboo. And, I thought, gosh, what's wrong with me? Why when I'm, it was all very much in my head. So, I would go through these
Mm-hmm.
fantasies that I felt very ashamed of. And that was a kind of only pathway to pleasure. I never really felt pleasure in it was always
Oh.
kind of in my mind, and then I met a partner when I was about 28, 29, and we had this beautiful relationship. At first it was very we were it was very long distance, and we kind of met on the dance floor, and then he didn't live in
Ugh.
town. We had this like really beautiful moment of meeting, and then for weeks we couldn't see each other, so we really got to know each other over message. We were messaging all day long back and forth, and it got very
Mm-hmm.
sensual and
Mm-hmm.
tease, a lot of anticipation. We would even write to each other in French so that the other one would have to translate. So there was even that extra
Stop it.
tease. Um, and it was beautiful. We were so open with each other and, shared our desires and, things that I didn't even know about, that really just came alive with this person. And then we,
Mm.
we had this beautiful, very open, non-judgmental, gorgeous relationship, and we explored so much together, and that's how I got into tantra. So we went to some tantra classes together, and you know I
Wow.
I came through a lot of sexual shame while we were together, and yeah, he opened up my body to things that I didn't even know could happen, even possible in my
Mm.
body. um and
How lovely that you guys living long distance like created you're talking so much about how slowing
mm,
down is what allows you to be in your
yeah,
body. And that was like in synchronistic, like the universe knowing maybe that that's what you needed. But if you guys were closer, that would never have happened. And yet it was like artificially created by the environment for you to
yeah,
learn to slow down with
yeah,
someone.
absolutely. And then, with myself as well, I kind of I've gone on, this up and down journey where, at times, I've been very open and I've been very wild, or I've been very curious or adventurous and, kinky, or, I've had all these, wonderful experiences of self-discovery and, moments with myself as well, where, I used to self pleasure a lot, and it was, you know,
Mhm.
and often it was, to reach a destination, to reach a goal, an orgasm, um,
Yeah.
and that was,
I mean, because yeah, I was gonna say because like who does not love that? That's like one of my. I recently have started keeping a vibrator in my
yeah,
shower, and I'm like I look forward to my showers so much more. Like it's great to just buzz one out and move on
yeah,
with your day. So yes, that is a
hmm
part,
yeah, and
and
and And there was, a time where I thought, I was having all this, great fun with myself, and and I knew my body very well. I could, kind of get to 0 to 60 pretty fast sometimes. Sometimes I
I
would,
love it.
I would even, go to the toilet at work, or,
Hell yes, run
yeah.
now.
But I knew that there was something more. I knew that I'd experienced this in partnership and hadn't experienced the kind of levels of um pleasure that I'd reached with someone else. I wanted to learn how to do that by myself, you know.
Whoa, wait a second. I'm like putting it together now. So you at this point you had that experience with that partner, and a part of you is realizing I'm not content just having had this one experience with this partner and my in my individual practice hitting, this level that is not at the level of what I was able to achieve with him. And you actually went as far as to go like, "Oh yeah, I can probably do that all by myself."
Yeah, I mean,
Oh
I
my god.
wanted to, I guess I don't know. I guess it was like a little challenge for me, and
Mm.
also, I came out of that relationship time. I don't think I was kind of ready to receive that kind of love that was there at the time, and I had other lessons to learn, and um came out of that
Mm.
relationship, and you know met with other partners, and wasn't having that same sort of experiences. So, not only did I want to learn, how to do that for me, but also, I was kind of like, how can I teach this to new partners? How I went down
Mm.
the route of wanting to learn how to teach sexuality, and teach connection and intimacy. But first of all, I thought this starts with me. I have to
Oof.
learn how to do that for myself, and um,
Which how would you describe like the difference between those two, right? When you're talking about like this partner that you're experiencing, maybe what we call like more of a tantric approach to connection, sexuality, intimacy, sex. And then after that completes these other partners that you were having it with, like what were the
um,
differences?
I mean, I think some of it is just chemistry, right? We can connect in very well with another person. I think, we shared a lot of the same desires. We were both very energetic, both very sensual, both very kinky. We had a lot of the same, um, I guess, kind of makeup, in that sense. And
Mm.
I think that that is something that we do have all these archetypes within us, within our sexuality, and all these kind of different parts, just like we do in in natural, in everyday life.
Everyday
Yeah,
life,
and
yeah.
I think we just gelled really well in that respect. How it worked differently with other partners, I guess there was parts of me that were being fed. So like like I was saying, I have a very kinky side. So I might have met a partner who was very kinky. And so that part of me was being met. But these other parts, the energy part that really
Mm.
loved tantra, or loved to have my feet washed with rose petals, and then my body kind of
Yes, please.
maybe that part of me wasn't being fed, or you
Wait. I know as I said yes, please, it like went over that other part. So just tell it again because everyone's going to be pissed at me that I spoke over you sharing another detail. So what was the
so
second part?
after the rose petals, oh, then your body is
Yes.
just being like massaged and played with and teased, and just given that time. I think that's another thing is, something that I used to feel really guilty with, is because my body needs a lot of time. Like, give it a couple of hours of like, soft, gentle touch, lots of space. Allow me to just fully open up.
Mm-hmm.
And then, there's so much more that can happen from that place, but I kind of need that first. And I used to feel so guilty. I used to think, "Oh, I'm taking
Yes.
too much, I'm taking up too much
Yep.
time," or, you know, I would just feel guilty for wanting that. And
This is like the plight of the high functioning, like extra empathic woman, is that we go through the world and we are already so overstimulated by the world that when you have a partner who just shows up and wants to push all the fucking buttons as fast as he can go and is in you within like 5 minutes. And same, I didn't know that until I met my current partner, how much I was in a lot of ways experiencing the trauma of overstimulation, of being rushed. I'd never experienced it slow. So I just kind of, is all I'd known. So, oh, my sexuality just fits into his. This is what we do. And before I know it, we're having penetrative sex, where now I'm like, holy shit, there is a lot that I prefer happen before we ever reach that.
Yeah, absolutely,
And how painful that is as someone, because a huge piece, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Like, I think a huge piece of our pleasure is the being in a down regulated space where you're actually in your body and you're not in like the fight, flight, freeze, fawn.
Just that real opening up, right? And the flip side of
Yes.
that, or the opposite of that, is when things do move too fast, your body can completely shut down. You might not feel any sensation at all, or you might even feel pain. For me, it was a lot of numbness for years, not feeling anything, and
Yep.
and thinking that there was something wrong with me because of that,
Or just hanging in there. For me, it was a lot of hanging in there while he's like trying to reach climax and feeling that like I'm at a point where it's not great anymore, but I can tell he's close. And so I'm just kind of gritting my teeth and like, please let this end soon. Even with partners that I liked, it's not even like, oh, I'm having sex I don't want to have. It's just looking back, my body was not warm enough, not even close to warm enough for penetrative sex to actually feel enjoyable.
Yeah, but when we're given that time for our body to just fully surrender, and again, going back to what I was saying earlier about asking for permission, asking for consent, that is in a way, that is in a way for me anyway, is that consent. It's like that time, taken before to allow her to relax. And then even with partners, I think somebody once asked me, can I enter you? And I was like, oof, like that felt so good. I thought, well, yeah, of course, because I could feel it. My body opened up to that, and it felt beautiful, and the difference between how that felt in my pussy to how it felt when everything just moved too quickly, or I was doing somebody else, or it's a big difference. And so, giving our body that space,
it's huge. I think a key aspect, so this month in the community, we're focusing a lot on embracing desire, like owning our desires. And I've noticed, I think a part that makes it so difficult to even have desire when it comes to sensuality is if it hasn't felt good, why would you desire it? And so I really wanted to hear from you, like, when did you first realize that you had what I think for most of us is like a broken relationship with desire? I think there's the heart of it is we've never really experienced true embodied pleasure. So it's hard to even desire it. And then for many of us, the things that we have desired have been shamed culturally, right? The fantasies you had, there was no framework for that actually being okay for a woman to want. So how did you first realize, like, oh, there's a lot of shit in here that has compressed or negated my abilities to experience pleasure or feel desire.
Hmm. Yeah, I think again, that's kind of been different moments, so different times in my life where I was experiencing something and maybe had this opening of like realizing, oh, this is pleasurable for me, but then I'm having all of this shame. And then working through that and then feeling open again. And then maybe something else happens or something changes within me, or, I really, I don't know if I'm doing a very good job of explaining this, but I feel like it's been many moments, not just one, many moments of
Yeah.
having these really expansive points in my life and then kind of really contracting back into shame or, something else or, so it has been, and it still continues to be a journey, learning and understanding and accepting things about myself and just having a lot of love for myself, in those moments of
Throughout
expansion
it.
and contraction, where you know
Oof.
I don't ever see it as um oh, okay, like I've finally done it, I found finally broke through all the shame, or you know
It's like a
a life
lifelong.
thing.
Yeah.
I had
Yeah.
I can't believe I'm going to talk about this, but I had a moment a couple of weeks ago, and I was with a lover, and I bit them, like I bit them, like, and
tell
it
us more,
it
Renelle.
was, in the moments of passion, and that, it was just this kind of nibble, and and he loved it, he loved it, but afterwards I noticed all the shame arise about it. I thought, oof, what what kind of lunatic are you? you know, and it felt really visceral at the time. It was almost like I was possessed by something of
Yes.
doing that. And, it was like wild eyed, and, it just kind of happened. And afterwards, I felt I had to like do a lot of work on it for a couple of weeks, like, understand why it was that I was feeling that way. And I think, there was a lot of like this good girl conditioning that came out, like, oh, like biting's bad, and you
Yes.
shouldn't do that. And, you know,
Or how much you liked the biting
yeah.
is bad. This like feral when you said you got kind of like wide-eyed and crazy, like I have full on biting sessions with Joe where he can just tell it's like a day where I'm feeling bitey and I will be like, I just need to bite the shit out of you. Like, and I will bite, 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 bite,
Mm-hmm.
bite. And yeah, it's like, whoa, wait a second. There's this part of me that I didn't know was in there, like saying when it first came out. And what a gift, right? To have partners
To
that
hold that.
went, yes, instead of being like, what are you
Mm-hmm.
doing? Are like, oh, okay. Let's, and that's a huge piece of feeling safe in those spaces with partners, right? To allow new desires spontaneously to arise and to act on them in that moment.
Yeah, because it definitely felt, connected to some sort of like feminine rage, and I spoke to my lover, and they're
Yes.
luckily, like you were saying, they're very understanding, and they're able to hold the feminine in kind of whatever expression comes out of her, and in that moment, it felt, something like, primal that came out of me as a woman. I've always been told to not let out my rage, not let it out.
Yeah.
And and fearing that kind of label that society has that says that we're unhinged if we do, right? Anyway, you know. And
Yes.
when I kind of really sat with that for a while and thought about the shame and that I was feeling, and then kind of feeling into that. And the moment I felt into that shame, I had the, and you probably know this little wicked grin that I get, right? Yeah. I
Yes.
felt that little kind of wicked part of me come through, and I just burst out laughing, cackling, and I thought, what a glorious lunatic I am, and how wonderful it is to express myself
Yes.
that way. And so, it's ongoing. It's ongoing. I have these moments, and each time I do, I feel like I open up into a greater acceptance of myself and my sexuality. And sure, there's going to be
Mm.
many more moments in the future, and so it's ongoing. So there's moments.
Yeah, because it sounds to me like, Tantra is very non goal oriented. Like we're trying to reach a destination as much as it is
Yeah.
the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Just as I guess, just as it is with life, it's for me and my understanding of it, it really is just becoming intimate with all that we are, the shadow, light, and kind
Oh,
of loving it all, and that is at the heart of Tantra, love. That my partner was able to just love me in that moment, even though, it seemed off for me. For him, he loved it. It wasn't for him, it was a very pleasurable moment. It was me that had the problem with it.
it's it's so healing to kind of I love when you brought up the good girl conditioning, right? When you get to a space and we're talking about it like all these moments where some part of you comes out to the surface that does not fit the conditioning you've been told of what the good girl or the good mother or the good wife or the good sister, whatever role you're supposed to be playing. Oh, if you were good at that, you wouldn't like this or you wouldn't be doing this. And I think that's why when you look at like kinks that people love, being called like a good girl when you're doing very naughty things is such a erotic turn on, because like you said, when you got that little wicked smile, it's realizing, and I love playing with that too in that space, like reclaiming, yes, I am biting my partner and I feel naughty and a little vicious, and at times I'm not the nicest and it kind of hurts. um and that is the very thing that, because I'm in this, with a partner that can hold space, also loves it, right? Loves seeing me buck those, throw off those conditions, who doesn't need me to play a role for him. It actually adds that element of like exciting, rebellious, like, I get to decide what me being a good girl means. And I think biting means I'm a very good girl.
Yeah, I have to frame that, because
Yeah.
it really is. It's embracing both those polarities, the bad girl and the good girl, and the kind of darker aspects of my
Mm-hmm.
sexuality, and then the lighter, more gentle, you know.
Yes, like range. It's so much about not just these, oh, stereotypical, this is what the experience looks like, as much as it is the range of being fully human. I would love, because this is a part of your story you've kind of referenced a couple of times, right? The like multiple instances feeling like moments of expansion and then contraction. Um, Sharing a little bit, because one of the things I love most about your story that I've also experienced is, you had this really expansive experience with a partner who was able to hold space and more grounded and had more of a tantric perspective to sex. And then I know later on in your life, you had a partnership that wasn't that way. I would love if you're open to sharing, because I think, especially for my women considering divorce, there can be this idea that like if you're in a relationship that's maybe narcissistic or abusive and you get out of it, that then you're going to find somebody and you're never going to experience that again. And you not experiencing it means you did a good job. When the reality for me as well is that, I have dated and been with partners since my ex-husband who actually were more abusive or less open in certain
Yeah.
ways.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's definitely an experience that I've had, where I've had these really beautiful, safe, loving relationships and then gone into relationships. For me, there's been a lot of distrust, a lot of lies, a lot of infidelity, a lot of gaslighting. Yeah, and felt that they were very abusive relationships, and there's been, fear of getting into relationships again where that might happen again, because, there has been moments of being in these beautiful relationships and then kind of falling back into that. Yeah, so there's been, I guess, moments in my life or periods of my life where, I've been in these really loving, safe relationships. And, certainly there was a time where that just almost felt alien to me, to be in a relationship that felt safe,
Mm.
that was offering love and really asking for nothing in return. And what felt more familiar to me was being in a relationship that felt unsafe. You know, there was an
Yeah.
excitement there. And, I recognized that as love at the time, this, because that's what I'd learned, that love was conditional and love was unsafe. And, that's from, my experience as a young girl, that was what I knew as love. And so the times where I've
Mm.
fallen back into those patterns where, something that was really painful felt like love to me. It felt like that kind of unease that I had in my body. Um, the betrayal, the lies, the abuse, the gaslighting, that kind of felt
Mhm.
normal and it felt exciting. And
You using that word exciting, I just want to highlight that because I think that's when you're describing that, that's that if you grow up in a world where you are dysregulated all the time
yes,
and adrenaline is your go-to, yeah, dysfunctional relationships feel often more comfortable because they are what you are used to. And I so relate to this because in the last year of dating my partner on the podcast, I've mentioned that, like, when it's been at its safest is times when my brain goes, what the fuck? We need to get out. We need to sabotage this. And my disorganized attachment style, right? Which comes from my parents, the abuse, the neglect that I experienced, or, formative sexual experiences in my youth, even if they were with other partners, of realizing, oh, yeah, love isn't safety. Love is drama, and love is circular conversations and being told who I am and defined. So, like, I love you showing that, yeah, our brain
does
does,
do that.
there's a draw
Yeah.
there.
And, for me, I've ended up in very controlling relationships as well. One, specific was very controlling, and there was something in that kind of made me feel loved. I was like, oh gosh, like he feels so strongly and so passionate about me, and I loved the attention as well that I got from him being so
Mm-hmm.
controlling. And there's a lot of lessons to be learned, in those experiences, right? And a lot that we can take from it. And, and I think now, like feeling that in a relationship now, for instance, say in the control aspect, I know that I need to
Yeah.
have that. I need to have really strong boundaries, and I lay them out from the
Mm.
start. And there's times where, and I've had that recently where a lover that I'm with wants to be monogamous, and I don't,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not, I don't want to be in a relationship. And I've had to
Yeah.
state that, and they've wanted to push those boundaries. And there was, and I
Of course they have. They're like, let me lock you down, Brunel.
And, in the past, I may have gone, okay, yeah, let's do that. Let's override those boundaries within myself because, maybe I want to please the other person or I don't want to hurt them and it takes a lot to go, no, you know, no, I know myself. I know what I want and I have to stick with this. I have to honor what is true for me right now. And that doesn't mean that might change or that change, but
Mm-hmm.
where I am right now and what I want right now is this. And
Yeah.
and if we can't meet somewhere, then I have to walk away. And that doesn't come from um, being avoidant, or it's just knowing myself and checking in and going, what is it I really want right now? And just honoring that. And in the past I haven't done that. I've gone along with what worked for somebody else because you know
We're so socially socially trained
Mhm.
as women to prioritize the good girl always takes care of everybody else. She wants what other people want first. She's not selfish. She's not greedy. Those are the
Yeah.
words that are used. So I'm thinking specifically like, I would say a lot of my women will relate to the feeling of maybe being in controlling relationships or being in patterns that they don't want to be in their marriages. And I'd be really interested to hear, maybe one small action that you would recommend that they could take in those moments that will maybe connect them back in, right? If they're feeling like, I have no idea what I want, I don't even know how to articulate it, where's a good starting
Mm.
point for
I mean,
them?
always dropping into the body, right? That's always a good place.
Mm,
It's like how do I feel in this moment? Like really connecting in with our emotions and then connecting in with the sensations in our body. Maybe bringing the situation to mind that we're thinking about. And if we say we want to make a decision, about something, bringing that situation to mind
mm,
and really just feeling how that feels in our body. And that's a kind of one telltale sign, but some people might be different. If you start to think about something, you might instantly just have a feeling, a knowing, and it'll, your
mm.
intuition will just tell you something. And it's starting to, I guess, exercise that muscle, and it's not something that might happen right away.
Yes.
It is like learning to play an instrument, or you know learning any new
Oof.
skill. Is like learning how to really check in. And I truly believe that our body is such a good kind of, I want, yeah,
Gauge.
to absolutely feeling, to you know, obviously, if you start to feel sort of tension and gripping, or, like maybe a bit of heat, I mean, that could be two things. Heat could be excitement, right? But, like if it feels
Mm,
uncomfortable, and that could be fear as well. That could also be fear, it's something new. But again, like learning when the sensation means one thing and when it means another. And that takes
yes.
time, that takes practice.
Yeah.
And so I think just really, again, just getting really intimate with yourself, and being also gentle, because we're not always going to get it right. Sometimes we get it wrong, and that's okay. Or like, is there mistakes?
Yeah.
Is there a getting it wrong? But I think just being really gentle, with ourselves, and knowing that we don't always have it all figured out, and that's okay. We're learning, every day we're learning.
Yeah. We can slow
Slow it down,
down.
absolutely.
I one of the biggest messages that came through for me in my journey was like, I slow down to speed up.
Hmm.
Because if I'm just continuing to push, 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 but I'm pushing in the wrong
Yeah,
direction,
yeah,
then that's going to take longer than just slowing down and figuring out what the right direction for me is in this
yeah.
moment. And if I slow down and figure out the right direction, then it is going to be faster because then I'm on the
Yeah.
track that's leading me to where I most want to be instead of swirling and, all over the place, just trying to rush and get away from, often we're trying to get away from that sensation
Yeah.
in the
Yeah,
body.
often we are. Absolutely. But yeah, you hit the nail on the
Yeah.
head there is like really just slowing down, stopping and taking it step by step, little by little, I think is the way.
Yeah. So I would love to hear. I'm just curious to like drop into present day for you. You've been on this journey since your 20s. What gives you the most pleasure? And so before I ask you this question, one of the things I wanted to explore with you was, and we talked about this, and I loved your perspective on this, that desire isn't just about sex. Pleasure isn't just about sex. It's so much bigger than that. So, will you, and I think that's going to maybe surprise women on this because I think we often think of pleasure and desire only in the realm of sexuality. So, tell me about your ideas on like thinking about it bigger than just in the realm of
Yeah.
sex.
Um, well, yeah, like we can find pleasure in everything, really, everything that we do, whether we are just doing the washing up or cooking dinner or, especially cooking dinner. It's like, how can I bring more sensuality into that? Maybe I can put on some beautiful music and dance, pour
Mm,
myself a glass of wine while I'm doing it, but really being present in that, being present in that is a sensual experience and recognizing that as a
yeah.
sensual experience, doing the dishes, like paying attention to the water, connecting, with the spirit of that for me is a really beautiful thing, or, taking a walk in nature. I can find that to be a very sensual, erotic experience sometimes because I get to feel, when I slow down in that way and I go out into nature, I feel myself connected. I feel myself connected with myself. And when you start to feel those kind of like sort of tingles in your body and I'm feeling it
Yes.
now just talking about it, So I think any moment, anything that we do can be an erotic experience or it can be a sensual, sexual experience, It depends
Yes.
what kind of lens we're looking at it from, and but really, even how we get dressed in the morning, like we can start to
Mm.
play these little games, of like when we're putting our socks on, imagine like really slowing down, imagine like pulling some stockings up your legs. We can do that every morning when we're getting dressed.
Yeah.
we can, or, just wearing nice underwear and no one else knows that's having that kind of
Yes.
thrill that or even not wearing any underwear at all, I mean, that's
Mm-hmm.
going more into the realms of eroticism, right? But like we can, how we drink, how we taste, if you're a very sensual person, really slow down when you're eating and taste the flavors of everything, be really conscious when you're doing things. And I think when we start to do that, like when we really become super present with everything that we do, that's when we start to experience the pleasure of life. It might be just a sound but just really tapping into our senses, at all times. And of course, there's going to be times that we forget and we go on to autopilot, but just in the moments that we
Mm-hmm.
do remember, just thinking about like, well, how could this moment be more pleasurable? Or,
More
yeah,
pleasurable. I loved you talking about the goosebump, like that kind of tingly feeling, because same, I know that is a very pleasurable feeling for me. And I've recently been thinking that like, oh, pleasure is what taps me into aliveness. Like when I am feeling more pleasure from, sun on my skin, the way something tastes, turning on music, really interacting with my senses, I move through the world in a more alive way, right? Now, I'm curious, and the reason I'm thinking of this is because I know there's going to be a lot of women on this call that, you know, did you feel when you were in a relationship with someone who was maybe more controlling or gaslighting you, was it more difficult perhaps to feel that pleasure or to feel that aliveness? Or maybe a feeling of like not feeling safe enough to really, you know, I feel like there may be women on this call that are like, I just don't even feel safe enough to in the space I'm in. Have you noticed that in partnerships for you?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm really glad you brought that up because, I was doing a lot of this work while I was in a partnership like that. And I would be going away and maybe
Oh,
going out for a nature walk, and I would come back feeling great and feeling super connected, and then just being hit with something where all of a sudden my nervous
mm,
system would just go into, overdrive, and and I would come completely out of that. And I would have to do a lot of work to then get myself back to that. So absolutely, it definitely makes a difference and
impacts.
impacts it. and
Yeah.
and learning skills to kind of regulate your nervous system in those moments is something that's super helpful that we can do, just taking yourself away from the situation, taking some deep breaths, um maybe just giving yourself a little hug and just being like, there, like that. Doing that then for
Yeah.
myself, I felt that sense of connection come back where, my body just remembered moments of times where I was taken out of it, and that feeling of what it was to be in that sense of fight, flight, or freeze, and so yeah, it absolutely does. And like thinking about this in a different perspective, of finding pleasure in every moment, like we can also find pleasure in those moments too, right? So like if we imagine moments that we don't consider pleasurable experiences, so moments where say we're angry in the car because somebody's cut us up, or and we have that feeling come over us, you know starting to even drop into those moments. So there's moments of where we don't like that we don't usually connect to as pleasure, and feeling the sensation of that. So maybe, or like even if you've had a good cry, just dropping into this and
Oh,
feel like you have a good
yes.
cry, and I'm not saying that, we can find super pleasurable moments right off the bat in a situation where we have been triggered in that way, or we have been, we feel unsafe in our bodies. Um, but it is possible, it is possible. But
Yeah. And you're talking about like a very, I just want to like acknowledge that what you're talking about is like a really beautifully high level of it's in the meditation practices, it's in where you learn to be with life from this space of interacting with and dare I say, finding pleasure or loving all that is. And that doesn't mean you stay in the abuse or you let the things happen, but what it does do is I think pleasure is very powerful, and so even if the pleasure is that in that moment you are feeling the pleasure in your body, in noticing my body is reacting, my body doesn't like this, and maybe you're allowing yourself to acknowledge I'm angry about this, and you're feeling pleasure in the asserting of your own anger. Like I think, yes, it sucked being in those relationships, but the journeys I had to get out of them, if I look back, there was a lot of pleasure created in the power of extricating myself, of really seeing that I was powerful enough to, you know, it's like the rebelliousness of finding pleasure when somebody else is trying to completely control your life and tell you you can only have pleasure in these ways, and reclaiming like, no, I get to have it my way and I get to have my life. And going on that journey of reclamation. Yes, it's hard. There's lots of pain. Those interactions are not what most of us would consider pleasurable, but there's that way of looking at it where it is the pleasure of, it's why people climb
Yeah.
Mount Everest.
And like walking away from something like that, that kind of act of defiance, that strength that you feel when you have made that decision and you go, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not doing this anymore. And, even in that moment of like tension and the difficulty that you're going through, when you feel into the powerful sensations that you're feeling in those moments, there's pleasure in that. There's pleasure in those acts of defiance and and walking away, if that makes sense, and choosing for yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Oh, I'm so glad we like dived into that right here at the end, because I feel like that was such a gem, expanding that with you. And I loved you bringing in such a, like, that's, I consider that a really high level coaching principle, that you can find pleasure even in the things that are really difficult. And I love thinking of it as like a source of power when
Yeah.
you do,
Yeah.
when you claim your life in all its facets. You get back the ability to kind of influence it, to
Mm-hmm.
change it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Ah, Renelle. Oh my God. I I just wanted to express first off my immense, immense gratitude for you coming on the podcast. First off, this has been such a yummy episode with you. And I have a feeling I'm going to need to have you on in the future to give us some more lovely stories and maybe even some practices, because you do, we talked a lot about the overarching principles, but you actually, when you're saying, the work and what it takes and getting into the body, that's what you do as a
Yeah.
coach,
Yeah. So
right?
very much, I would say like a lot of somatic. So a lot of getting into the body and really feeling what's there and just being present with it, without even having to connect to any stories about it, but just really feeling what is going on in our bodies and just allowing these parts to come through, these parts to be witnessed, the good ones, the bad ones. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
especially the bad ones. I love playing with them. They're my favorite.
Mm-hmm. Which is hard, and that's one of the things I loved the most about you when you were coaching me. It's hard sometimes to see those parts of yourself, the ones you say are bad, without a compassionate witness holding space. And that is what you are so good at, is that playful, open. I mean, you guys can hear it in her voice, right? That is her essence of everything gets to be here, nothing, and it really did for me. So many of my parts came forward with you that felt like they could be seen from that safety of, it's not going to be judged, nothing's going to be off the table. Yeah, it's truly a gift. I would love for you to give a little sneak peek, because not only is Renelle giving this gorgeous podcast episode to all of you in the Stay or Go world, but she is also coming in to do a workshop for all of the women in the community. So, speaking to those practices, right? What are some of the practices that you're going to be bringing in that
Yeah, I
workshop?
mean, I'm super looking forward to coming and spending the morning walk. So nice. But yeah, we're gonna be going into our bodies, feeling a little bit of pleasure in our bodies, allowing ourselves to really connect in and be present with what's there. We're also going to be I'm going to guide you through some stuff, a little bit, some of the things that I've learned along the way. And also we're going to be doing a deep meditation, like through the heart, into the womb space, and really connecting in with what's there, what are our desires, connecting in with our higher self and asking her to help us as well. So yeah, it's going to be super gentle, very delicious in our bodies. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to guiding you all through it.
Oh, I am too. We picked, what did we pick? We picked Sunday, 23rd. We picked that today. It's going to be a Sunday morning workshop. Like, hell yes, which is so sweet. If you guys couldn't hear, Renelle is over in the UK. So we had to do a weekend one, which is so generous of her. I'm really looking forward to this. I would just want to say too, for those of you like, I'm always talking on the podcast about whether it's me you work with or somebody else, finding someone to support you. And if you have felt that zing with Renelle, we're going to have her website listed in the show notes. It's such a gift. Like, if you ever feel a zing with a coach, reach out, make some kind of connection, find a way to see if that is your person, because it makes a world of difference when you find that person that has your same energy or that vibe or that transmission that is the next step for you. She's also, we're going to put her Instagram in. She said, I'm like so excited. You said you're rebranding it
Yeah,
soon.
yeah. I'm not gonna
So
share what the new name is just yet. But you can currently find me at Tantra Maha. But that is gonna be changing soon, just so you know.
I love it. I love it. I'm here. It's my favorite thing about Taylor Swift. Like, if you don't have various eras, you're not doing it right. Like, you got to
Yeah.
have.
And I definitely fall in the realms of like a shapeshifter, where I you move and shift and change. So yeah, I'm very comfortable with change. Yeah.
Yes. I love it. I love it. Yeah. Amazing. Thank you. Thank you, my love. For those of you wanting to get in on that workshop, make sure I will have Alex link in the show notes, that code you can text that will take you right over to the community, and we will get you onboarded and you will get to be in there with all of us. So thank you,
For having
Renelle.
me. I've really enjoyed it. It's beautiful as always to sit and chat with you and just be in your company. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Mm, so wonderful. So special. All right, everyone. Till next week.